Live. Microphone's working. Just did a Streamlabs update, so sure everything's still working properly and looks good. Alright, so we're back and we are working on our boy Jin-Gitaxias. Needs 21 more cuts in order to be done. Get him down to 60 spells and 40 lands. And every single one of these cuts is gonna hurt now because he did not start off with a ton of cards, and cutting anything here just feels like it's not gonna work out too well. So let's see. Go over our list. We got Counterspell, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Mana Drain, Mystic Remora, Merchant Scroll, Force of Will, Mystical Tutor, Mind Stone, Sapphire Medallion, Scroll Rack, Grim Monolith, Time Spiral, Thran Dynamo, Misdirection, Rhystic Study, Time Stretch, Rush of Knowledge, Gilded Lotus, Lightning Greaves, Mind's Eye, Oblivion Stone, Solemn Simulacrum, Vidalcan Shackles, Sensei's Top, Kira, Fairy, Trickbind, Coalition Relic, Pact of Negation, Cryptic Command, Glenalendra, Everflowing Chalice, Mind Sculptor, Cozy, Old Lamog, Steady Progress, Thrumming Bird, Blue Sun Zenith, Consphinx, Cage Sun, Metamorph, Tezzeret's Gambit, Snapcaster, Cyclonic Rift, Rapid Hybridization, Curse of Swine, Reality Shift, Hedron Archive, New Lamog, Promised End, Summary Dismissal, Torrential Gearhulk, Baral, Contentious Plan, Karn Great Creator, Narset Parter of Veils, Bounding Conundrum, Thieving Skydiver, Ravenform, Archmage Emeritus, Solve the Equation, Triskaidectophile, Second Jin-Gitaxias, Offer You Can't Refuse, Wiretapping, Haughty Jin, Cityscape Leveler, Flow of Knowledge, Experimental Augury, Ickermoon Gauntlet, Leyline of Anticipation, Alhamrat's Archive, Expropriate, Spellseeker, Force of Negation, Amphim Mutineer, Arcane Signet, Fierce Guardianship, and the Scepter of Eternal Glory. And I almost forgot, but still very important to our deck, Mana Crypt. So, out of all of those cards, we need to cut 21 of them. And while there are a few that are kind of odd until you think about why they're in the deck, most of them are just a lot of raw power and or great synergy with the deck, and we kind of need them. Okay. So real quick, we have a list of our counter spells down here. Yep, there they are. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Of those 11, one of them can actually counter spells. It counters activating triggered abilities, and that's Trickbind. So but Brawl also makes our things cheaper. He doesn't affect Glenalendra Archmage, because she's a creature, but he does make like Force of Negation down to 2 blue, Cryptic down to 3, Trickbind down to 1, Misdirection if we want, and Force of Will if we want to hard cast them are at 4, and then all of our other instants and sorceries. But how many do we actually have that we are likely to cast, as opposed to getting them for free off of Jin's third ability? So Merchant Scroll, Force of Will is 2. Time Spirals 3, Misdirections 4. Yeah, I'm not going to count Time Stretch. Rushes 5. Trickbind is 6. Cryptic is 7. Steady Progress is 8. Blue Sun is 9. Gambit's 10. Cyclonic Rift is 11. Curse is 12. Reality Shift is 13. Summary Dismissal is 14. Plan is 15. Raven form might be 16, depending on if we foretell it or not. Solve is 17. Blow is 18. Augury's 19. Negation would be 20 if we hardcast it. Alright, so right now we've got 20 instants and sorceries that benefit from having their cost reduced by at least 1. So the question then becomes, do we need Medallion, Haughty Jin, and Brawl? I mean, our creatures do benefit from the Medallion, but the Medallion's also not a creature, and we cut a lot of our creatures, so I'm hesitant to cut too many, because if we have no blockers and no attackers until we're winning, like until the Great Synthesis goes off and we get like 3 Eldrazi Titans in play, I don't see us winning if we just get beat down in the meantime, because we're vulnerable. Hello, Strudel. Welcome back. So I'm kind of loath to cut Brawl or Haughty Jin from the deck. Which means it might be Sapphire Medallion, even though it also discounts our creatures. Yeah, like I said, every single cut's gonna hurt. So maybe Sapphire Medallion. We'll keep staring at the list until something comes to me, but don't really want to cut Shackles. That is one of our better answers in the deck. Getting attacked early, just being able to steal the cheaper creatures and hold on to them. And we don't care if we bounce them later on, because we'll still have the Shackles, or the Shackles will be gone anyway and they'll have gotten their creature back. So 6 of 1. Maybe it's Torrential Gear Hulk. It's kind of in that middle ground between when our stuff is good and when it's great. We got Jin down to 81 spells. I like to do 60 spells, 40 lands for Commander as a general rule, so we're trying to get him down to about 60 cards. And the last, 30 cuts are usually incredibly hard, because we're getting rid of stuff that I really wanted to try in the deck versus stuff that absolutely needs to be in there for the thing to work. So it's always a bit rough. So yeah, Gearhulk's kind of in that spot. Like, Snapcaster is good early and good around this time because we can cast the spell. He's a smaller body, but we don't need 6 mana to run him out. We do need cuts, and I would rather cut one of the more expensive creatures than one of the cheaper ones. Also, he can't recast our sorceries, which isn't a huge deal for the most part, but it would be nice if he could also buy back Rush of Knowledge or Contentious Plan or solve the equation the way Snapcaster can. And if I'm being honest, we probably don't need second Jin-Gitaxias either. Like, he's fine in the deck, and we certainly have things that are fun to copy, but by the time we get him online, we could have gotten the other one, like, flipped over, and that's our main thing anyway. We already cut the first Jin, so not having either of his other two forms is probably fine. Still want the Gauntlet. Still want Leyline. The Mutineer might be the worst of the turn a creature into a token. The only upside is that you actually have a 3/3 afterwards, whereas the other ones are just spells that turn the things into tokens. So we could actually use him to block the 4/3 that we're giving out as a replacement. Still not the best card in the deck. Alright, so we cut Other Jin, we cut Torrential Gear Hulk, that brings us down to 79. 19 more cards to go. How hard could that possibly be? Alright. Let's start at the bottom and work our way back up again. So, do you want Mana Crypt? Do you want Scepter? Signet? Fierce Guardianship? So the Amphin's a possible cut. Forceful Negation might be the last counter spell we can cut. How many things does Spellseeker currently get? Spellseeker gets Counterspell, Mana Drain, Merchant Scroll, Mystical Tutor. So it always runs into the same problem of getting Merchant Scroll and Mystical Tutor, which gets basically any of our other instants or sorceries that we desperately need. Violet Stone. Ew. Does get Pact of Negation. Yeah, I can already tell it's going to be too many for me to feel comfortable cutting it. Cyclonic Rift, Rapid Hybridization, Curse of Swine, Reality Shift. Contentious Plan. Yeah. Hmm. Do we want to cut wiretapping? Hmm. Extra card draw every turn, which we don't have any other like personal Howling Mine effects in the deck. If we get rid of wiretapping, and it's a way to cast one of our big scary spells for free potentially before we get to Great Synthesis. So, but we're gonna have to cut something. Like, we can't just run 23 lands in a 100 card deck. That's not gonna work out too well. Maybe we don't need Expropriate and Time Stretch, but I really want to hit one of them off of Great Synthesis so that way we actually win the game when we cast it. So that way all the Eldrazi can attack. Um, so we got? We've got Amphin Mutineer potentially, Wiretapping potentially, Force of Negation. We cut Force of Negation. We still have Counterspell, Mana Drain, Force of Will, Misdirection, Trickbind, Pact, Cryptic Command. We also still have Summary Dismissal because I did cut Disallow off the list, but we put Summary Dismissal back in. So we actually have 11 counter spells, so maybe Force of Negation can go. It's either Force of Negation or Misdirection. Like, those two are the weakest of the free counter spells. So maybe it's Misdirection then, and we keep Force of Negation. Because Misdirection's only going to help against things that target Jin, and they still have to be spells. Like, if Misdirection worked on spells or abilities, maybe. Hey, I'm talking myself into cutting one more of the counter spells, and I think it's going to be Misdirection. Let's get it off the main list, too. Pop back up here. We go 78. Clear out Misdirection. Alright. So what do we have for card draw? We have Mystic Remora, Time Spiral, Rhystic Study, Rush of Knowledge, Mind's Eye. Oh, that's true. We do have Mind's Eye, which is a better um like Howling Mine effect for us than Wiretapping is. Oh, excuse me. We could also cut the Archmage. We have so few creatures to begin with that it's going to be pretty easy to kill him and harder to get. I was going to say harder to get the card out of him, but Triskaidekaphile we need to cast on 6 to guarantee a card draw. And she's just as likely to eat a removal spell as the Archmage is, or get swept up in the Wrath effect, so. Also, we gotta have something to distract before Consecrated Sphinx comes down. Hmm. Experimental Augury and Archive. Maybe Blue Sun Zenith then? It's the most expensive to get a large amount of cards out of all the ones that we're running. But it is reusable in that it shuffles back in so we can draw it again later. And we do generate a large amount of colorless mana, so it's not unreasonable to cast it for a high amount. I don't want to cut any of the proliferate ones. We want to just skip from chapter 2 to chapter 3. That's the easiest way to guarantee Jin doesn't get killed by comes into play enchantment destruction. We can cut Jace, but with Ichor Gauntlet and Alhamrat's Archive, I would really like to keep him if we can. Drawing 6 cards and putting 2 back would be amazing, and getting to use him to proliferate Jin, also not terrible. So if we cut Blue Sun's Zenith, we still have Rush of Knowledge, um, Flow of Knowledge as like the 2 end time spiral. So we have 3 things that put, like 5+ cards in our hand immediately just for the one spell. Yeah, we need something to cut, and I think I can justify getting rid of Blue Sun Zenith here as the weakest one. So, chop that off. 77. Alright. I did promise I was going to run Rhystic Study in this deck just so I have a deck that actually runs Rhystic Study. Do we need Mystic Remora also? I feel like the answer is still yes. Like, this one's way harder for the opponents to pay for when they do the thing, and it's just so many potential cards that way. Like, really, besides the cumulative upkeep, the only real downside is we don't get to draw off of it when we cast it for Jin, so... Keep coming back to the Sapphire Medallion. Maybe we can cut Mind Stone instead. I don't want to cut too many of the cheaper mana rocks. So we have like Arcane Signet. What are our other ones? We have Arcane Signet, Chalice, and then like the big ones like the Mana Vault, Soul Ring. Hey, maybe we can cut Mind Stone, leave Sapphire Medallion in. The only downside to that is when we're trying to ramp for artifacts, Sapphire Medallion doesn't help. Which moves me back towards cut. Like, one of those two probably can go. So, upside on Sapphire Medallion, if we're casting a bunch of blue spells, it's multiple mana. Downside is it does not help us ramp into our artifact mana early. Like, we can't go, like, land, Soul Ring. If we go Sapphire Medallion, we're done. If we go Mind Stone, we could potentially, like, Mana Vault or something still. Also, just playing the Mind Stone means we would untap with 5 mana towards, like, Gilded Lotus at that point. So... Whereas we would have to hit a land to cast Gilded Lotus. Which might not be a foregone conclusion. If we had all of that ramp in our hand, we might have kept it just because it's like, oh, and then we hit one land and we have Gilded Lotus on turn 3, and then our deck just explodes after that. Versus, oh, I can cast Jin on 4 and hold up, one of my 3 mana plus counter spells instead of having to go, like, pitch to cast it. And I think it's going to be Sapphire Medallion. It's close, but there are a few things that we mostly want it for the early game to make our spells cheaper so that we can get on the board faster and then protect Jin once he's down. And Sapphire Medallion is slightly worse at that. Just barely, though. It's really close. Like, there's an argument to be made for both of them, and I'm not really thrilled about cutting either of them, but I'm also not thrilled about cutting anything on this list, so... Shrug? Alright, what about the more expensive mana rocks? Like, we already don't have Warm Power Stone in the deck. Is there anything else in that range that we don't super need? So we have, for the more expensive ones, we have Dynamo, Lotus, Sad Robot, Coalition Relic, Hedron Archive, Skyclave Relic, and the Scepter of Eternal Glory. The only one of those I kind of even think we could cut is Thran Dynamo, and I'm not thrilled with doing that because I want to be able to hard cast the Eldrazi if it comes to it. So yeah, alright. Thran Dynamo maybe if we just cannot cut anything else, but still not thrilled about that one. Like maybe if I'm thinking about cutting the Dynamo, maybe we consider Skyclave Relic since it's 6 mana to get it to make 3 versus 4 mana, and we have enough ways to invest the colorless mana. Alright. Still want Scroll Rack. We're gonna have so many cards in hand, and just having more ways to guarantee that we cast all of the big spells in one turn seems too good to not run. Lotus, Lightning Greaves. Yeah, we don't have Swiftfoot Boots. We do have Greaves because it's 0 to equip. That way we can use it to protect Jin, and we can also use it to give haste to one of the Eldrazi or Cityscape Leveler, which is basically an honorary Eldrazi in this deck anyway, since he's got a cast trigger. Kira? Poor Kira. I haven't put her in a deck in forever. It'd be really helpful to protect my things from targeted removal. But that's kind of the same thing that Lightning Greaves is in here for. And then, counter spells and whatnot, so maybe we don't need Kira. It is cutting another creature, and one that just eats up targeted removal, so I want to cut Teferi. Ever want to cut Teferi in mono blue? Like, ever. Steady Progress, Thrumming Bird, Consecrated Sphinx. Could be Cage Sun. Got either of those or that one. Got Archive, Ulamog, Emrakul, Summary Dismissal, Baral. I hate to cut Karn, but Karn is in here more along with Confounding Conundrum to offset other players' aggressive mana ramping. More so than anything else. That's true. When I was talking card draw, we do have in the land slot Seagate Restoration, which also can give us a big boost of cards. Maybe we can cut the Skydiver. All it's doing is stealing like soul rings and whatnot, which again, we have plenty of uses for the colorless mana, and it's taking our opponents off of resources. But it was also in here because it was a small flyer that went along with things like Grazlix that we already cut. So Maybe it just has to go because it's not actually drawing us cards. Yeah, okay. Sorry, leaving Skydiver. I want wiretapping. I don't know if it's going to make it, though. Then again, I want a lot of things that I don't know are going to make it anymore. Right, Mutineer? It might legitimately be the Mutineer. Like, it does exile, so it goes well with... Like, it does the same thing that the reality shift is doing, where we get rid of the thing forever, so it helps with indestructible creatures that rapid hybridization can't kill. I don't know, maybe rapid hybridization can go and we just lean on like the Mutineer, the Reality Shift, and Curse of Swine, because those three can all exile. And Raven Form too. Okay, maybe hybridization can go then. Maybe that's the one that actually needs to get out of the deck. Alright. Alright, so we cut those two. We go down to 74. I love your deck, Jin, but we're gonna lose 14 more cards. And I'm gonna feel bad because I wanted all of them in the deck. And this is not the deck to cut Sad Robot from. Still might be Kira. I don't know, is this the deck where we cut Sensei's Divining Top? You know, one of my most beloved cards that's in, I think, literally all of my commander decks that I have built right now. Is this the one where we don't need it because we go through so many cards anyway with all of our other effects? Like, top would be great in this deck if we just could cram in a future sight effect. So that way we can spend 1 mana and draw a card functionally with it. And just keep doing that. To get us back to 7 for Jin. Yeah, maybe without that. And I don't want to put Future Sight in here just for that. And Future Sight does not work with Great Synthesis Chapter 3 either. So maybe we can actually cut top from here. God, that feels weird. That is almost as weird as cutting a Soul Ring from a deck. Just like, I don't know how I would ever comfortably accomplish that. Other than building like some insane, probably green devotion deck where I have like all of the, I cost like 4, 5, and 6 green mana and no colorless. Even then, there's going to be spells where I would want Soul Ring in there for it. You know, just to tap for the 2 mana to activate Nykthos in the first place. Help me cast my, I don't know, Moss Diamond and stuff like that. Cunning Conundrum, Raven Form, Emeritus, Solve the Equation, Vectifile, Wiretapping. Alright, one more time. Let's look at the actual draw spells. Because I feel like it's going to eventually be Wiretapping, just because it costs 5 mana, and then it has to survive a turn cycle, and then we start drawing extra cards. with the upside being that when we get to a full hand, we get to cast like an Eldrazi Titan for free. The ideal would be flip Jin, get all the cards in our hand, cast the Titan for free on our next draw step, get the cast trigger. Chapter 2 goes off, we bounce it back to our hand, and then we force Chapter 3 to happen immediately and get the cast trigger a second time in the same turn. Like, that's the ideal with wiretapping. I don't know that it's good enough just as an enchantment that has to live to do anything. The same is true for the archive, and then we need to do a card draw effect with the archive, like we don't get the extra card just for untapping with it. We do have tons of card draw, though, so... Whereas wiretapping, even if we have tons of card draw, that just means we could be casting that instead of wiretapping. Hey. Sorry, Hideaway Honden of Seeing Winds, but I must cut things. And you have been deemed one of the most cuttable cards left in the deck, so... Yep, there goes top. Okay. 12 more cuts. Alright, let's do a quick count, make sure my count is accurate as I agonize over all these cards. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 3, 54, 55, 56, 7, 8, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, and 73. Is that what we were at, or we were at 70? We're at 72. I miscounted somebody somewhere. So we're actually at 73. I probably either forgot to count Jin at one point in time because of his little commander notation, or I just forgot Mana Crypt at the bottom again, maybe? Cool, so we actually need one more cut than I thought we did. That's why we double check when we get low enough. Make sure I'm not off somewhere. Alright. 13 more cuts. Maybe we can leave Jin with a couple extra spells because of all of his card draw. And the fact that he's monochromatic, so we don't... And we might be able to cut fetch lands now, because we only have... We still have Scroll Rack and Mind Sculptor in the deck, though. So knowing what the top cards of our deck are and wanting to shuffle them away is still a very real thing with the deck. But maybe we don't need all of them. And that actually helps a bit with the land count, because now drawing them isn't getting 2 lands out of our deck and reducing the chances we draw another land by, an extra fraction of a percentage each time. Also, we just have fewer fetch lands in general, with only having four from the onslaught style ones, and I think we have Fable Passage on the list. Yeah, so we're not even running that many fetches to begin with. Hmm. It might still be the Mutineer. That leaves us with, because if we leave Ravenform in, we also have the option of killing artifacts with that one, which none of our other cards do super well. Like, we do not actually interact with a problematic artifact very well. I was also thinking we don't particularly interact well with planeswalkers except by attacking them with our few creatures. Most notably, an opponent's Karn Great Creator would be terrible for us. Like, probably even more so than Narset, if I'm being honest. Like, shutting off all of our mana production and our Oblivion Stone is probably worse than shutting off our card draw. Not by a lot, but it's like we don't want to cast the spells versus we can't cast the spells. So at least we could get an extra draw off of any of our instant speed cards that we can cast on the opponent's turn, or if we have Teferi or Leyline out. Yeah, I don't really want to cut the three. We have basically three hate cards against the more prominent strategies in Karn, Narset, and Conundrum. And we also have Trickbind for my new favorite hate rod, like lightning rod for my hatred target in Thassa's Oracle. So we've got all of those boxes checked off. I kind of want to keep them in the deck if we can. But that's still leaving me with 73 cards and needing to cut, like bare minimum 10 more, but I prefer to get all 13 of them out if we can. Do we cut Mind Sculptor? Like, the other planeswalkers in the deck all have a secondary reason for being in there other than that, like, in fact, they have a primary reason for being in here in that they hate on what the opponent is doing while still giving me things that Ickermoon Gauntlet can interact with in addition to all of my spells. Like, Mind Sculptor is the only one that's just here to draw me extra cards, and maybe Ickermoon Gauntlet. So maybe, like, he is the worst of the planeswalkers we still have on the list. He draws me three cards, puts two back, so I only go up one card physically, which is relevant for activating Jin in the first place. But also, um, puts two of them back, so we know what we're drawing next turn. So if we don't have the fetches now, we can't really get through those two cards. I mean, we have five fetches in the deck right now. And said robot to shuffle. Anything else in our deck shuffle? The Eldrazi Titans if we discard them, but that's not viable since we don't have a ton of control. Like, we don't have any ways to manually discard them. We have to be forced to do it. And we certainly are trying not to have a maximum hand size, so that's not an option. The Sad Robot shuffles. Oh, Merchant Scroll. Like, I passed by it while trying to look for cards that shuffle and didn't even acknowledge it. Alright, let's try that again. So, Merchant Scroll shuffles, Mystical Tutor would shuffle, Time Spiral shuffles, Bad Robot, new, Beck Ulamog, new, Galley Shift, Hedron Archive. We're up to like 8 shuffle effects. We can also kind of use Narset in that way, like put back a spell we want to have in our hand, and then minus her and put that spell back into our hand and get rid of the other card. Or just put 2 cards we don't want back on top and minus her and hope that we hit underneath those cards, which is about the same thing. Solve the equation. Hmm. Yeah, we don't have a ton of ways to shuffle either. So, and at least Skull Rack can give us a large number of cards looked at all at once. When we get to keep the ones that we wanted anyway, swap the rest of them around, try and find like the perfect hand for chapter 3. Alright. Sorry, Mind Sculptor. Yeah, let's go get rid of him down here too. Okay. Alright, all of that work just to get back down to 72. Okay. Making progress. Moving on. Gilded Lotus, Lightning Greaves, Mind's Eye, Oblivion Stone. Still might be Kira. Pact, Cryptic. Do not want to cut Glenalendra. Could be Cage Sun. I don't think it's going to be though. I think that gives us too many ways to like too much mana. Not too many ways. Too much mana towards casting our big scary spells. That if Great Synthesis isn't an option for whatever reason, and we have one of the big bomby spells, we can just cast it. That is one of our other outs to a resolved Narset, is just being able to cast one of the Ulamogs or Cityscape and then try and draw all the cards so that way we can set up Great Synthesis. Also, Cage Sun is a continuous effect, so opponents' Karns aren't going to shut it off. Hey, so we'll hang on to that one for a while as an option and keep looking. Versus Swine, Reality Shift. Like, it can't be correct to cut solve the equation. It gets literally all of the best cards in our deck for setting up what we need. Draw all of the cards. Flip Jin. Draw even more cards. Get to chapter 3. We're making such good time, too, and now I just feel super brick walled by all of the things that I desperately do not want to cut at all from this deck. Like, can we cut Expropriate or Time Stretch? We can, but I don't want to. I want to make sure we have at least one Time Walk effect, and we might as well have the biggest, flashiest Time Walks if we're going to focus on Great Synthesis as the way we're casting them, as opposed to, just run Time Warp Capture or Temporal Extortion. Ozolek and Ulamog, Steady Progress, Thrumming Bird, Consecrated Sphinx. I hate to cut Metamorph. I really hate to cut Metamorph when we're ramping with artifacts the way we are, and when we have some big bomby creatures that we can copy. Like, we can't do the Titans, but we can easily do, like, a Consecrated Sphinx or a Cityscape Leveler or, like, Snapcaster and recast a spell. This feels too versatile to cut it. But then again, everything on this list feels too good to cut now. We are at that point where everything is either very much what the deck is trying to do or an answer to what our opponent is doing at any given point in time. It might be the Mutineer. Much as I would like to keep him, it might be the Mutineer. And that leaves us with Raven Form, Reality Shift, Curse of Swine, Shackles to get rid of a creature functionally, and our counter spells. Goodbye, Amphimutineer. Think you're gonna go. Think. Pretty sure. Do we have any other creature removal that I'm forgetting about? It just kind of pushes it over the top. Tackles. More and more counter spells. Lamog's Trigger. Cyclonic Rift, kind of. Curse of Swine, Reality Shift. There's always a chance that I should keep the Amphin and cut the Reality Shift. The Reality Shift gives the opponent the top card of their deck, and if that card is an instant or sorcery that's bad for, especially an instant that's bad for us, like if we don't have Teferi out and we put the instant back in their hand with Chapter 2. Like, I'm really reaching for reasons to cut Reality Shift over Amphin, but they're both about the same power level in the deck. Reality Shift is cheaper and an instant, but has a small chance to backfire, whereas Amphin is more expensive, but is also a creature. And it gives them a larger creature too, and it has the encore ability, so we can hit like multiple creatures if it dies and comes back. But then we're still left with an army of 4/3s if we can't get to Great Synthesis Chapter 2 fast enough. So we're still going to get overrun. Assuming that we're the problem or that we're just the most vulnerable and easiest to attack. Whereas Reality Shift, we can kill the thing that's attacking us mid combat and only give them a 2/2 to work with. And if it's something innocuous, like a land or something they're never going to get to cast because, Eldrazi everywhere, that doesn't really matter. Yeah, basically only matters if it's an instant or a spell with flash when we don't have Teferi down. And then they can actually stop what's happening to them because I gave them their thing back. Yeah, I'm slightly more inclined towards the Mutineer getting cut. But I don't really want to cut either of them. The other argument is to cut Raven form and just be a lot weaker towards random problematic artifacts. Because the Mutineer might actually be better than the Raven form overall. The Raven form also benefits from being a 3-mana non-creature spell, so we get to draw a card off of Jin. Also, a 1/1 bird is way less problematic than a 4/3 for our deck. Like, the 1/1 bird is going to basically occasionally be able to get into attack like Karn or Narset, but other than that, us taking 1 damage shouldn't be the end of the world. Like, they need Biden of Thassa style effects where they're just getting to draw all these extra cards for getting in for damage. Yeah, okay. Still leaning towards the Mutineer out of all the things we could get rid of. Archive, Spellseeker, Force, Scepter, and Crypt. Okay. That's 71 now. 11 more cards to go. I've been at this almost an hour, and we have managed to cut 10 cards. Probably technically 11 because I had the miscount before, but yeah. We have managed to cut all of 10 cards from where we started. It only took us an hour, so an hour from now we should be done. That's not that bad, right? Just look at it like I do work, where now we only have an hour left to go before we're closed and I can go home. That's the worst way to look at building a magic deck, is like it's work. I'd much rather think of magic as the fun thing I do and not be at work. Alright. Like, I really don't want to cut Kira. She's so good for stopping targeted removal. Like, I play Kira and it basically becomes, okay, we'll just wait to Wrath if we can and not worry about anything. And if I can counter the Wrath, then we're super good to go with Kira out. Hmm. I keep coming back to her because she's more protection for the cool things we're trying to do than a cool thing we're trying to do, and we do have other ways to protect a lot of the things. But it takes a lot of pressure off of the pile of counter spells we have if we can, not have to counter a targeted removal spell against Jin until the second one they use in a single turn. Our deck is mostly instants and sorceries because that's what Jin wants. I think we're still mostly instants and sorceries, right? If we scroll back up to the top, we've got let's see, counterspell, mana drain is 2, scroll is 3, force mystical's 5. Time spiral would technically be 6, but the card's getting shuffled away, so let's stick to 5. Time stretch probably not going to trigger Archmage Emeritus. And when it does, it's not going to matter. So rush is 6. Trick Bind is 7. Pact is 8. Cryptic's 9. Steady's 10. Gambit's 11. Rift is 12. Curse is 13. Rift is 14. Dismissal's 15. Plan is 16. Seagate, if we cast it, is 17. Raven Form's 18. Solve the equation 19. Offers 20. Flow is 21. Augury's 22. Again, probably not casting Expropriate. Force is 23, and Guardianship is 24. So over a third of our deck triggers Archmage Emeritus right now. Even if we cut 4 instants and sorceries, it's still a third of our deck that triggers that guy. So still very much inclined. Just leave him in the deck right now. Alright, is it Haughty Jin? 3 mana, star 4 flyer, based on the number of instants and sorceries in my graveyard, and he makes my instants and sorceries 1 less. So the biggest thing about the Jin is that it is a relatively cheap flyer that can have reasonably high power. Like, it's not unlikely for this thing to be a 2/4 for 3 mana early on, which can pressure like random early planeswalkers that come down. Um, and attack players for damage in the early part of the game. Try and get them in range of 1 attack from the Titans. It's also just a cheap creature with decent toughness that we can use to block early attackers, so that way we don't get run over. Random utility 2/2 or 3/3 chipping in for damage is going to add up if we're the only ones without blockers. Especially since those things aren't going to be blocking anyway, so anybody being vulnerable is probably worth attacking with them. And the Jin can actually block, unlike, for the same reason that these hypothetical creatures aren't blocking, like my Archmage Emeritus and my Triskaidectophile probably aren't blocking either. So, it might still be Haughty Jin, but Not thrilled. We're thinking about cutting things like Kira and Haughty Jin, like our little evasive creatures that can come down early and chip in for damage, or protect our things with Kira, or make our spells cheaper with Jin. Don't want to cut Hedron Archive, ramp, and then card draw when we don't need ramp, or when it's about to explode randomly. Hmm. Okay, my mic did not move, so you cannot hear me frustratedly tapping my mouse as I try and process which cards need to get cut. Head, because I really desperately do not want to cut any of the things we have left. Like, everything we have and everything we can do with this deck just seems really cool and fun. And I'm not even down to only needing 10 cuts yet. I mean, technically, I might be, like I said, we might be able to get away with, like, I don't want to, like, no more than 63, but definitely prefer 62 or 61 if we're going to keep a higher spell count. Alright, what do we have that will let us skip Jin's chapter 2, basically? Like, hit 2 and 3 in the same turn. I don't think any of the early spells help with that, but to get a bit deeper. Cryptic. These are helping. So it's Steady Progress, Thrumming Bird. Gambit is 3. Contentious Plan is 4. Also, technically, we can add Karn's Bastion to the deck. I had forgotten that I was thinking about that, and that would be 5, and it would be taking up a land slot. So if we add that, that would be 5. Augury 6, and Icar Moon Gauntlet is 7. So if we add Karn's Bastion to War of the Spark, excuse me, as a land in the deck, since we have plenty of room for some colorless lands, if they're going to have this much utility. So we add Karn's Bastion in, and then we can cut one of the mediocre proliferate cards to get us down to 70 and probably still be in a good spot as far as how many proliferate effects we have in the deck. So potential cards are, I think, Contentious Plan and Experimental Augury are probably the two easiest to cut. Steady Progress costs more to be an instant than Contentious Plan, but it also, because it costs more, means we draw a card with Jin, like an extra card, so it's actually blue. It actually becomes an instant speed divination with Jin's front side, in addition to being a way to, advance Jin from 2 to 3. So yeah, I think we cut Contentious Plan then if we're going to do this. The other option is to cut Thrumming Bird and just keep the spells in. Thrumming Bird does benefit from being a Phyrexian, though, so we do actually get to hit the proliferate after bouncing everything, like somebody's going to be vulnerable at that point, where we can get in for the 1 point of damage and trigger the proliferate to get chapter 3 going. So yeah, I think it's going to be contentious plan then. Let's go cut it from the card draw. Oh, right. Alright, that brings us down to 70. So there we go. We added a land, we cut a spell. We still have the same number of things that'll let us let us do the thing with great synthesis, so I mean, it's possible we could cut one more of them. I don't want to cut too many of them, but maybe we can get away with only 5 at that point. So Gambit, Progress, Thrumming Bird, Bastion, Ickermoon Gauntlet. I think we might actually be at 5. I think we were up to 6, and then we cut it down to 5. Going down to 4 seems way worse. 1 in every 25 cards versus 1 in every 20 cards doing the thing. Alright, what else can we cut then? If we're not doing that. Archive. Hey, we need at least 7, like bare minimum 7 cuts. Real quick. Okay, it is a permanent. So the biggest thing about expropriate, like why I could consider cutting it, is if it were not just any permanent, then we can choose, like, we time walk. That's going to be our vote every single time. But if we bounced all of the creatures, and creatures are one of the few things we could steal with it, and they all chose money instead, then we wouldn't actually get much out of it other than it being a time walk for 9 mana. But if we can still steal their other resources out from underneath them while all of their creatures are in their hands. Alright. I just had to double check, make sure there wasn't a good reason to cut expropriate that I wasn't thinking of. But yeah, no, seems like it should stay in. So, time stretch and expropriate are our time walk effects. Just keep staring at the cards. One of them is eventually going to tell me that it doesn't need to be in the deck anymore. And then we can cut that and we'll be good to go. Come on, cards. Which of you don't need to be in the deck anymore? Bastion, Narset. Like, end of the day, Icar Moon Gauntlet triggers off of us casting um, things that would trigger prowess anyway, so it does not need any planeswalkers. So in theory, we could cut Narset. The only thing we have that forces players to draw is Time Spiral, so it's more cutting into their card draw. I still hate the idea of cutting her though, but I'm running out of things we can cut, so I have to at least consider. I hate considering things like that though. We could cut Archive. If I'm being completely honest. Like, what does Archive actually do for us? It does nothing just by itself, so we need other card draw. If Jin is in play, we get to draw 2 cards every time we cast a spell that meets the requirements. All of our card draw spells get like a massive boost. We don't ever gain life, so that part's never a factor. But boosting all the card draw, like aside from getting half our deck into our hand so that we can scroll rack away all of the cards we don't need and literally just hand dump to win the game. And we have plenty of other things that are drawing us tons of cards. So do we need something that makes all of those cards better, or do we? Because I don't want to cut any of the actual card draw anymore for a in order to keep a card that requires the other card draw to be working. Basically, like, yes, I love the idea of flow of knowledge or having consecrated sphinx out and just getting to draw like 4 cards for every one that an opponent draws, but we are choked to death on deck space here. And we have to cut things, and I would rather cut the archive than any of the cards that the archive benefits from having, so it still hurts. Also, I hate that Contentious Plan is over there because now I've forgotten if I actually crossed it off the list at the top. Alright. Get rid of Archive. Because I think that we did. Oh, hey, we got the number the internet loves. Alright, quick recount. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 2, 53, 54, 55, 6, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 2, 3, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, and 69. Alright, so still 69 cards. We don't actually have Jin on the list. We have 70 cards still. He is not here. Oh my god. Oh, good job, me. Uh, wonderful. I love it. Negative progress again. Hey, sip of water. What are we gonna do? All that agony to cut out Hamlet's archive, and now I just noticed that Jin-Gitaxias is not in his own deck. Yep. Oh, thank God I do this as a hobby instead of professionally. Otherwise, I'd be very disappointed in myself. Like, how do we leave the commander off of the list for the commander deck? We just assume that he's already in there and keep going every single time. Like, I actually had a moment where I'm like, I did count Jin, right? Like, because normally the whole thing with a parentheses in the front, sometimes I forget to count the commander, so I just scrolled up to check on him. And sure enough, he's not actually physically on the list. Uh, my soul is wounded by all these cuts I need to make. Alright. Well, we did make a cut. Just because we secretly had 71 instead of 70 does not mean we did not make a cut, so we did get closer. It's just the goalpost was a little further away than we thought when we did it. Alright, if we're running Kira, I think that we are. We technically don't need Lightning Greaves. Like, this isn't. A lot of times with decks that I build, they have creatures with useful attack triggers or just, things that are worth protecting from targeted removal. So Lightning Greaves goes in the deck and goes on those creatures. In this deck, aside from Jin himself, like, I guess Consecrated Sphinx, like, those are the two that I would most like to protect from random things happening to them. Like, random things are always still going to happen to creatures. It's Commander. Everybody has creature removal. But do I actually want Lightning Greaves in this deck? Do I actually want Cure Great Glass Spinner in the deck? Like, I feel like one of those two can come out. I don't know which one I actually want. It might be Kira just because she herself is a creature and therefore vulnerable to wrath effects. Like, we cast Kira, somebody goes for like a wrath, and we have to counter it. Whereas if Lightning Greaves is in play and attached to a creature, it becomes, well, how important is the this specific creature? Do we have to counter to save it versus can we just hang on to Lightning Greaves and cast another creature later and Greaves that one up and use this counter spell to protect that creature? Because with Kira, almost all of the wrath effects become must counters if we have anything worth protecting. Then again, if it's worth protecting, we're going to cast the counter on the Wrath anyway, even without Kira, if we have Lightning Greaves equipped. But I feel like, let's say we have like Kira and Triskaidekaphile in play, I feel way more inclined to counter a Wrath at that point than if I have Lightning Greaves and Triskaidekaphile, and it's just like, okay, I could draw some more cards off of this before it dies, but that's kind of whatever. Whereas the other way, I'm getting 2 for 1 to end losing the card advantage creature. Also, Kira is fine to attack with, but she's another thing. She's a 2/2. Like, I'm not blocking with her in almost every scenario. Like, her and Archmage Emeritus are never getting into combat on the defensive side. Unless they absolutely have to and things have gone terribly wrong. Alright, sorry, Kira. It was a well fought battle between you and Lightning Greaves, but at the end of the day, Lightning Greaves is just too much better, I think, for what I'm trying to accomplish. Also, the haste is not nothing. For example, if we drew our 7 cards off of Great Synthesis by flipping Jin, and we don't have the mana to cast Thrumming Bird, but we do next turn, and we Thrumming Bird and Greaves it up and attack with it and go from Chapter 2 to Chapter 3, then that's another benefit for the deck, whereas Kira does not do that. Like, we cast Kira and Thrumming Bird, and they just kind of sit there and feel awkward. Um, like, probably to the point where we wouldn't even cast them in that scenario. We would put them into play for free off of Chapter 3 if we got there. Yeah. Alright, so Kira, yes. Getting cut. I'm wondering if it is Augury or maybe Tezzeret's Gambit. Tezzeret's Gambit is a sorcery which doesn't do much to detract from it, but it is something. Like, if we have to cast Tezzeret's Gambit before we flip Jin-Gitaxias, then it's going to cost us, somewhere between, like, almost definitely 3 mana and 2 life, maybe 2 mana and 2 life, or 2 mana and a blue mana. And then we get to draw 3 cards off of it and lose out on the proliferate effect. And the only upside to running it is that when we flip Jin, we can like speed ahead to Chapter 3, which is the main reason I'm running it. But we also are running So that would still leave us with 4 cards that do that. So we still have the Bastion, Steady Progress, Experimental, and Ichor Moon Gauntlet. And I think those are our only ones now that proliferate. And the Thrumming Bird. Right, we do still have Thrumming Bird, so we would still have 5. Alright, if we're going from 6 to 5, I'm a little more okay with that, so let's cut the Gambit. Nope. Still need to go back. There it is. Alright. That brings us down to 68. We're getting there. We are so close to being done. We just need a few more cuts. Alright, we cut those so we can clear these off before I have to do another recount. One and a half hours in, and we are behind schedule for getting our other 10 cuts in. We could stop having cards magically have to be added on. That might help. Time stretch, no. Rush of knowledge, no. Mind's eye, definitely not. Dead robot. Can't cut to fairy. Back down here, looking at the mana rocks. I'm debating if I want to cut Skyclave Relic. It's 6 mana for it to add 3. We don't have anything that untaps our artifacts. The only thing we have that would not be great with Skyclave Relic specifically is copying it with the Metamorph, since we wouldn't be able to kick the Metamorph and get the other 2 tokens. But beyond that, it's not like we have like a Tezzeret or a Manifold Key or something where we're missing out on the extra utility of being able to untap it and tap it for 3 more mana. Because we do already have Scepter and Gilded Lotus for colored mana, and then we have like Thran Dynamo, Grim Monolith, and Mana Vault to make 3 colorless per card. Coalition Relic always costs 3 and can make up to 2 mana in a turn cycle. 3 mana if we proliferate onto it randomly, because we do have Karn's Bastion and Ichor Moon Gauntlet now, so both of those can give us more mana on the next turn. As well as any of the other proliferate cards if we want to burn them that way. You know, we need to draw cards anyway, so we might as well get more mana for the subsequent turn. Alright, we need cuts. And I think it's the worst of the remaining mana rocks now. Like, I'd rather it either be cheaper or somehow make even more mana, and neither of those are gonna happen, so yep. Just cut the relic off of there. Alright. That brings us down to 77. Or, I'm sorry, 77. 67. Yeah, let's not add 10 more cards to the list. I'm already getting crushed by having to cut the cards that we have to. The Will, Mystical Tutor, Scroll Rack, Monolith, Time Spiral. There is a part of me that's tempted to cut Time Spiral. Like, giving everybody else a fresh 7 is never great, but there is a very real chance we can cast Time Spiral, untap the lands, flip Jin-Gitaxias, and possibly even go all the way through to Chapter 3 almost immediately. With the right cards already being in play. Um, it's unlikely, but it's certainly doable. Like, technically, we would just need Ichor Moon Gauntlet and to find one of the proliferate cards, and we flip Jin, we cast it, we put the counter on him, get Chapter 2, and then proliferate to Chapter 3, and then just. And we should have like 14 plus cards in our hand at that point, which has a very high chance of winning us the game on the spot. Yeah, now that we cut Kira, I'm slightly less inclined to cut the Haughty Jin. It's still not great. Do we dare cut the Mind Stone and lean harder on the volume of mana that some of our other cheaper things can produce? Like, the Mind Stone is literally only one additional mana ramped, and it's colorless. The main upside is that we can sack it to draw a card, but now it's only one card since we cut the archive. And since it's a 2-drop, it can't trigger Jin. Front face. Hmm. I think the one biggest mark against cutting it is that I'm already tempted to go over my normal 60 card um, thing. Um, like my my rule for deck building, and that is primarily because we do not have lots of color requirements, and we don't have a lot of fetches in the deck either. So we're not diminishing our land count when we do draw the other lands in our deck as much. um, but the trade-off for that is that we will miss a land drop more often than we otherwise would, and having a cheaper artifact that produces mana means that's less likely to actually hinder our development. Like, casting Mind Stone is the same as cycling a card to find a land, basically, in that we get to spend mana and hit our land drop, and we didn't get to do it naturally, so we had to spend the mana on it, but at least we did hit that land drop in the scenario. So it's less acceleration and more actually just getting us to the mana we were supposed to have on the turn anyway. But that's not nothing when we're a little land light, so. Yeah, it might be Mind Stone still as good an argument as it is for keeping it in. We gotta cut something. I don't really desperately do not want to cut any of these cards. Oh my god. Like, we have so much going on in this deck. I just want to keep all of it. Like, there's a part of me that's seriously considering reality shift at this point. Like, the biggest reason not to do that is we're running lower and lower on creature removal, especially ways to interact when the opponent decides that they're attacking us, as opposed to having to do it preemptively with a card like Raven Form, because it's a sorcery. We won't always have Leyline just chilling there helping us out. But we don't cut anything, then our deck's too big and we just can't have that right now. We need to get it down to a more reasonable count. Don't want to cut those. I don't want to cut these. Like, we need a certain critical mass of a bunch of different things to make sure the deck functions consistently, and I really don't see how we're going to get there if we cut some of the stuff we have left. Like, there's a part of me that's kind of tempted to cut Mystical Tutor because Merchant Scroll and Spellseeker and Solve the Equation are all just better, especially since they just give us the card. This is definitely a deck where card selection is less important than card quality. So getting the additional card to hand instead of fixing the quality of our draws, maybe. Like, and this is a hell of a card to cut from this deck at this point. Like, our deck is so heavy on instants and sorceries to begin with. The idea of cutting a card that tutors whichever one of those we need. Uh, it doesn't seem great, but it is probably the weakest of all of our tutors that we currently have. Like, all of the other ones put the card into our hand to raise the card count back up to where it was, so we stay net neutral on cards towards getting Jin's 7 cards in hand requirement. Whereas Mystical Tutor, while it is fine in the deck, like certainly 100% playable with all the card draw that we do have, like just tutoring for a card draw spell and casting it has to be good enough, right? Like, it has to be. Can we really cut Mystical Tutor from this deck? I'm trying to, but maybe that's still wrong. It feels like it has to be wrong, right? Like, in what universe can I actually cut Mystical Tutor? Even if we do go down a card in hand, technically. The fact that we can go down a card to put Rush of Knowledge or Time Spiral or Flow of Knowledge or any of those things on top of our deck. Like Mana Drain, Cryptic Command, Force of Will. It can't be correct to cut that card. I mean, it can. It 100% can be correct, but Oh boy, does it hurt. Thundrum, Seagate Restoration, Raven Form, Emeritus. Yeah, now I'm looking at the Emeritus and to a lesser extent the Triskaidekaphile. Like, if we cut either of them, we are cutting a permanent with repeatable card draw attached to it that we probably need to cast at 6 mana to guarantee we get a card out of it every time. But we can cast earlier than that if we absolutely need to. Like, they're both repeatable card draw effects, and I do not want to cut either of them. Despite the fact that they are both probably just going to eat a removal spell very quickly when they show up. Like, I can't imagine Archmage Emeritus survives to untap with him in most games, but I mean, it'll happen sometimes. Just because I don't see it happening doesn't mean that, everybody's going to have removal all of the time and they are going to definitely kill the Archmage over something else that is also, a card advantage engine that's probably a bigger threat. You kill Consecrated Sphinx before Triskaidekaphile for the most part, but so somebody else's big scary thing might distract from a removal spell for the yeah. I don't know how to shorten it. Triskaidekaphile. Like, file doesn't sound quite right. Trisk doesn't sound quite right. The 13 person, you know who I'm talking about. And the same is true for Archmage Emeritus. Like, they're both good card draw effects, especially in this deck. Also, there's a random chance we just win from Triskaidekaphile because of the way our deck is set up. Like, getting to 13 cards in hand, that's flipping Jin and casting a spell before our upkeep, and we win off of Triskaidekaphile. So, bonus points if we cast Jin, keep him alive, flip him the next turn, and then draw the 14 cards, and the card that we play out of our hand is Triskaidekaphile, because then people need to kill that even more so than they need to worry about Jin, and maybe that distracts for the turn that we need to actually get to chapter 3. So I don't want to cut Triskaidekaphile. I don't want to cut Archmage Emeritus either, because we have too many instants and sorceries in the deck. And even not counting the ones that cost like 7-8 mana and we're never gonna cast them until we're winning the game. We still have close to 20. So, actually, we should still have over 20. We had like 24 before. So even with the cards cut, we should still be like 21 or 22, somewhere around there. Alright. Looking at Mystic Remora, I don't want to cut it. Mindstone, and I don't want to cut it. Mystical Tutor, and I don't want to cut it. Time Spiral. Alright. Quick double check down here. A Rush of Knowledge. So if we cut Time Spiral, the things that are more or less guaranteed to put a large number of cards in our hand to get to 7 Rush of Knowledge, yes. Consecrated Sphinx, yes. If it doesn't die, Mind's Eye, yes. Didn't we cut Tezzeret's Gambit? I thought we cut Tezzeret's Gambit. Yeah, we did. Okay, so we forgot to cut it from this list down here. Alright. So, Flo puts a bunch of cards. These two can Consecrated Sphinx, Mind's Eye, Rush of Knowledge. Like, I'm looking at like 6 cards that put a bunch of cards in our hand that are left in this deck. I really don't want to cut Time Spiral now. Alright. I don't know. If we're going a little lighter on lands, maybe we can cut the Cage Sun then. Like, if we're pushing this hard to get it even close to 60, and I'm thinking about cutting a cheaper artifact that produces mana, maybe I need to cut the most expensive artifact that can produce mana in the deck. And we don't really need the +1/+1 effect. Like, that's not doing anything. Most of our like game ending cards are colorless anyway. So we're not buffing most of our creatures. Yeah, if we need cuts and if I'm seriously considering going under on land, before I cut a 2-drop mana rock, I need to cut the 6-drop that would take me from like 3 mana from my lands to 6 mana from my lands most of the time, or 5 mana, depending on what, like maybe we have a colorless land or a non island blue source. Like maybe we have Seagate restored or something. So yeah, let's cut Cage Sun. Like, I feel bad because it does help cast the Eldrazi, but I don't want to spend another like hour and a half agonizing over cuts to the deck. Like, that one is worse than any of our other mana rocks. And except maybe Mindstone, but Mindstone we can cast when we're landlight, and Cage Sun we cannot, so like yeah, it's a cool thing to mana drain and then cast Cage Sun, and all of a sudden we have like 6 mana on turn 3, but still not where I want to be at. Otherwise, like when it's failing, I would much rather have a Mind Stone or something than a Cage Sun. And when it's the better card, you know, now I only get +1 mana instead of +3 or 4 mana. That is a big deal, but gotta balance it somewhere. Like, we can't just keep cutting cheap artifacts or we'll never ramp in the beginning, and we can't go under on lands on top of that, so something's gotta give. So I think it's gotta be the thing that lets us win when we're already doing well versus the thing that's going to stop us from doing nothing when things are going bad. What are we gonna do? How are we going to get like at least bare minimum? What do we need? We need 3 more cards out of the deck at a bare minimum. Like, I would prefer to have 4 or even 5 cards out of the deck at this point. Like I don't mind going like like one short on land or two short on land, really, but I don't want to not have enough mana in this deck. I really don't. So deck a file offer you can't refuse. I don't know. Maybe it's Haughty Jin, but that does not seem great with all of the other creatures that we cut. Like Jin, I just don't have the same issue getting it into combat with 4 toughness. Just that threatens to block so many like cheap utility creatures that would otherwise chip in for damage, and basically makes the opponents have to commit a larger threat or kill him first. Which Commander, it's gonna happen, but it's gonna happen to anything I had in play anyway, so it might as well be something that's just there to distract and make my spells a bit cheaper on the way. Coming up on the 2 hour mark, and we have not finished the deck yet. Yeah, the closer we get to finishing it, the harder it gets to actually make any progress at all. What are we? What are we going to cut? Like, I already cut a whole lot of things that I didn't think were cuttable, just on the argument that we have to cut things. So, what is left? I don't know. Maybe we can focus on our own game plan. If we focus on our own game plan and we cut things like Confounding Conundrum and Karn Great Creator, because they are there primarily to hose other players' strategies. I am assuming that I'm going to be playing this deck against things where those strategies are going to not only be prevalent but need to be answered in some way in order to stop them from running away with the game. So I hesitate to cut either of them. The amount that they do to stymie opponents in the early game while we set up just can't be completely ignored. But by the same token, I have nothing. Like, actual nothing I can cut right now that doesn't feel like I'm losing something important from the deck to do it. Like, even the cards that have redundancy to them, like all of these artifact mana sources, I feel like we do need them, especially if we're going to go lighter on land. Like, we need to make sure we hit land drops. I have already cut all of the counter spells I'm super comfortable with cutting. Like, can we cut Force of Negation? Technically, yes. We could also cut Cryptic Command if I really wanted to. Because it's 4 mana to protect our spells, but it's also drawing us a card, maybe two with Jin out, or bouncing a permanent, or tapping down potential attackers. So it's kind of like we're going to cut something with that much versatility for something that's, less versatile but more good at the one thing that we want it to do. Like Cryptic Command at 4 mana to counter a spell is not amazing, but the fact that we get to counter that spell and draw a card, or counter that spell and bounce a permanent that's giving us trouble, or counter the spell and tap the potential attackers on the turn if they were casting pre-combat to set something up, or just because they wanted to cast the spell. I hate to. I don't want to stop right now. I want to keep going. I want to get Jin done, but I'm back in that rut of I don't want to cut anything that we have left. Like every single card that I look at, it's like, yes, I want Counterspell. I feel like Mana Vault and Soul Ring are essential to the deck. Mana Drain is never getting cut. Mystic Remora, there's an argument to be made for cutting it, but it is one of the better card draw spells in my deck. We are going to draw at least a few cards from it. I don't see Mystic Remora, unless it eats a removal spell, I don't see it not drawing us at least 3 cards before the cumulative upkeep starts to become a problem, and we don't want to keep it in play anymore, unless we are already super late in the game when we draw it. Like, obviously, Mystic Remora, we want to cast it on, like, turn 3, maybe. I won't really cast it on turn 2 and have to keep dedicating the mana to the upkeep cost, but I could see getting to, like, 3 or 4 mana and casting it, and then just sitting on it to generate card advantage. There's also an argument to be made for casting it turn 1 and just committing to tapping all of our mana every single turn to keep it alive. So that way, turn 1 Soul Rings get dinged for a card, and maybe we can actually draw a bunch of cards off of it and set up for our mid to late game. Because at that point, we would have to discard some of the extra cards that we're getting, but maybe we have a card we don't mind discarding at that point because we're getting so much card advantage and staying close to the 7 that we need to flip Jin in the first place. Can't really cut Merchant Scroll. Tutors for all of my blue instants, which, the deck is chock full of. So. How many of the instants draw cards? Like, if we can only tutor for counter spells, we can get Flow of Knowledge with it. We can get, like, I don't want, like, Steady Progress or whatnot. We can get Flow of Knowledge with it. Is that the only instant we can get that draws us a ton of cards that's left? Like, all of the other ones are at sorcery speed, or don't draw us a ton of cards. They draw us, like, 1 or 2 while doing other stuff. Because that does make it. Right, I'm not forgetting how Merchant Scroll works. It's a blue instant only. It used to be instant or interrupt. Blue instant card reveal and put into your hand. Yep, okay. So maybe if the only things it can get are. Here, what are all of my instants now? Alright, so we kind of jumped past Counterspell because I didn't mark it off, but we have Counterspell, Mana Drain, Force of Will, Mystical Tutor, Trick Bind, Pact of Negation, Cryptic Command, Steady Progress, Cyclonic Rift, Reality Shift, Summary Dismissal, Offer You Can't Refuse, Flow of Knowledge, Experimental Augury, Force of Negation, and Fierce Guardianship. Maybe it's Merchant Scroll then. Like, it can get us a counterspell, like anyone that we want from our deck, and it can get us one decent removal spell and like it can get us Mystical Tutor to get our sorceries. Like, we can tutor for a tutor to set up. That's not amazing. Yeah, this is how bad it's gotten. I'm thinking about cutting Merchant Scroll in a deck full of blue instants. In a mono blue deck that has multiple instants in it, like it's not 29, but it's probably like 15 or so. And I'm seriously considering cutting it because most of the instants it tutors for are just counter spells. Like aside from getting Mystical Tutor to unlock the rest of our deck, we are getting counter spells, reality shift, and flow of ideas or flow of knowledge rather. I don't want to, but at the same time, it is one of the things that is not doing as much as it like default should, basically. Like Merchant Scroll in a mono blue deck with a bunch of instants and sorceries should be able to tutor for more things than like one or two creature removal spells. It's true. It's Cyclonic Rift is the other thing. Like it can get Cyclonic Rift, it can get Reality Shift, and it can get all of our counter spells. And it can get like one big fancy card draw spell out of all of the ones in our deck. Yeah, okay, I think it might legit be Merchant Scroll just because it's not. It doesn't have as many targets as I thought it did, and the targets are not as versatile, right? Like, just let me make sure. Yeah, I don't think it's as versatile as it otherwise normally would be. So, man, Jin's deck is harder to build than I thought it was going to be. Like, I always have this problem when you get down to, like, the last few cuts, but he is making it extra difficult. Okay. I need at least bare minimum two more. Gonna grab a little thing to snack on. Give myself a second of not staring at the screen and thinking about the deck. Try and basically restart the brain. That is one of the problems when you keep looking at the thing over and over again. You start getting into like a mental groove, and it gets hard to break out of that. So, if I just take a moment and eat this little snack cake thing. Maybe it'll help me a little bit. All right, so bare minimum 3 cards. Like, I want to get it down to 62. I don't think I want to do 63. Would prefer to cut 4 cards. if I can figure out the fourth card to cut. And considering how much trouble we're having just getting close to 60, also we get a few more restrictions because we're not um because we are trying to get it close to 60 and not to 60. Like, again, Mind Stone probably could be cut if we were doing 60. At 62, though, I don't want to cut the Mind Stone. I want to have another cheap mana source. Also, if we're doing this, we probably cut Temple to the False Gods. Having two less land in the deck probably not going to help this card at all, so I think it's just safer to cut it. Trickbind, Coalition Relic, Pact of Negation, Cryptic Command. There's some argument to be made for Cryptic Command. We already have Summary Dismissal. Running 2 4-mana instant counterspells is not the best. Like, we want our answers to be cheap enough to interact with the cards that they're answering, and we do have to spend a lot of our own mana on our own turn. Like, decks that I have that have Cryptic Command in them can usually function much faster than this. Like, Cryptic Command is in things like Nin, where I have a ton of artifact mana, and Nin herself is very cheap. And I'm just trying to cast her so she can dome herself for a ton of damage and draw me that many cards. And the other deck I run Cryptic Command in is Tasigur, who can potentially cast himself for 1 mana. So, plenty of situations where I can cast a powerful spell and leave up most of my mana, and then if nobody does anything that needs to be interacted with, we get to activate Tasigur. So, yeah, much the same way as like any other control deck, you want to make sure you have other things to do with the mana, so that way, if the opponents don't do anything that requires a counterspell, your mana isn't wasted. And we don't have that as much in this deck, so if we're going to hold up something like Cryptic Command and not use that mana, we need to be doing other stuff on our turn, so that way we're only losing out on the Cryptic mana, but we're still adding to the board and developing. And the more I think about it, like, Cryptic and Summary are probably too much. Like, if I'm not going to go down in counterspells, I should probably trade Cryptic in for a different one. Like, the versatility and the power level are both there, but the casting cost is the issue. Like, I think I would be better off with another, like, cancel level spell than with Cryptic Command. Because we need to be able to cast Jin on 5 and flip him for 4, so that's like 9 mana, so we're probably not doing that in a single turn with counterspell backup anyway. Because then we're looking at, like 9 mana to do it if we have one of the free counterspells, but if we're trying to hold up a counterspell on top of that, which we're discussing whether or not we're leaving Cryptic Command in, so we're obviously focused more on spells we actually have to pay mana for, like Pact of Negation and Force of Will are in the deck so that we can spend 9 mana on Jin in a single turn and still feel confident that we're going to untap with his enchantment in play. But if we're relying on Cryptic, so we have to cast Jin, wait, and untap, and then spend 4 mana on that, and then, 4 mana on this. Like, is it better to have this card because we will get to draw the extra card or bounce the problematic thing also while countering a spell? Maybe. The problem is that right now we're cutting it for room and not to laterally move to a different card. where we would actually be able to cast it more consistently. Like, we're out of free counter spells that we could run because we're not running Thwart or Foil or any of those, so we have all of the free counters in the deck. Do we want to cut Cryptic Command then more for its lack of functionality in the deck? Like, if our main reason for running counter spells is to protect Jin, Cryptic Command is not the best one for that. At least Summary Dismissal protects Jin from uncounterable spells. So, yeah, if we were going to run another 4 mana counter spell, it might even be better off being something like Mindbreak Trap at that point. But we probably just want to get it to be a cheaper spell. If we cut Cryptic, what counter spells are we left with? Counterspell, Mana Drain, Force of Will, Trick Bind, Pact of Negation, Summary Dismissal, which is not on the list, Glenelendra Archmage, Offer You Can't Refuse, Force of Negation, Fierce Guardianship. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We would be left with 10 counterspells in our deck because we cut Cryptic, but Summary Dismissal's not on the list. Trick Bind is only really good. It's not a counterspell, though, so we're technically left with 9. It is a way to counter certain abilities, though, which are also very problematic for the deck. Like, if we can counter an opposing Oblivion Stone or Planeswalker Ultimate activation, or, in addition to being able to stop Thassa's Oracle from winning the game, then that is a way we can do that. I'm genuinely thinking we cut Cryptic Command. Like, I put it on the list because of the raw power level of it and the fact that we were going to want to run a wide array of counterspells. But I think I should have cut it before some of the other ones because of how we intend to use it is not as good. Or more accurately, because it's not as good because of how we intend to use it. Like, we are planning to use it to protect Jin, and 4 mana to protect Jin is not where we want to be. We want to be 2 mana, 3 max to protect Jin. So, all of our other counter spells are in that range, except for Summary Dismissal, which has the added benefit of being able to stop the few things that would normally get around the counter spells, and also being a backup for the same things that Trick Mind is in here for. So, alright. So we cut Cryptic. That brings us down to 63. So we need bare minimum one more cut. Like, at the absolute worst case scenario, we need to just cut one more card. More would be better. Like, getting the deck back closer to the 60-40 split is definitely something I'm interested in, but we are so choked to death on what we can actually cut here. Like, I think Kozilek is the worst out of all the things we're going to be putting into play for free. And he's still, like, he's a 12/12 Annihilator 4 that drew us 4 cards for casting him. Like, that actually goes a long way to making sure we still have 7 cards. Like, we can reflip Jin if we need to. And reflipping Jin and bouncing a bunch of Eldrazi is not the worst when we're going to cast them all again. So that's not an unreasonable situation to get into. Raven form. Archmage, just get Decaphile. Offer you can't refuse. Jin. One more. If we can just cut one more card. Also, we're going to lose Temple for the reason I said before. I'm also wondering if we need to lose Wasteland. I'm thinking we want to cut some more of the non-island cards, so the non-basics, just so that way Flow of Knowledge actually draws us like 5 cards, because we do have to discard 2 to it, and we have cut Alhamrat's Archive, so it's not like we can double up and then discard, only a couple cards. So we need it to basically be drawing us 5+ cards. Because if it's not going to do that, then we almost need to replace that one with something else. Yeah. Like, Ancient Tomb I still want for the ramp, but we can get rid of Wasteland, keep Strip Mine, because it's more versatile. Keep Reliquary Tower. I don't know that we need Cavern of Souls. We can't use it to protect, like, casting the Eldrazi off of Jin because we're not paying for them, so there's no way to spend the mana on them. So we're most likely going to be naming Phyrexians, so that way Jin himself can't be countered. And I don't know that is good enough when we are going to be focused on making sure Flow of Knowledge gives us enough cards. Like, if we can get it down to, like, I want to say, like, Mystic Sanctuary is an island, so that counts. So we have, like, Seagate Restoration, Strip Mine, and Reliquary Tower right now. As our only non-basic lands that aren't islands and can't get islands. So, oh, and Karn's Bastion. So that's 4. We're up to 4 cards that aren't islands and can't get islands. So, if we're going to have 38, so we're going to have 34 islands in the deck, or 34 mana sources that count as islands for the purposes of Flow of Knowledge. Okay, I think that'll work. So, but we do need to make at least one more cut in order to declare Jin finished. do not know what that one card is going to be. Steady Progress, Thrumming Bird, Metamorph, Snapcaster. There's a part of me that's tempted to make it something simple like Experimental Augury. Like, Augury's only purpose in the entire deck, really, is to get Jin from 2 to 3. We don't always need to do that. We will need to sometimes, and we have multiple ways in the deck to do that. So it becomes a question of, do we need Experimental Augury? We need Experimental Augury. I think ultimately the answer is no, but it's close. Cutting Experimental Augury still hurts a bit. Not having that option to skip ahead on Jin, it's one more card we don't have that would let us do that. Is there anything else we can cut? What are our other realistic options if we don't cut Experimental Augury? Like, is it Mystic Remora? It might be. Tutor still can't be correct. Like, there's way too much it actually does for the deck for that to be correct. It could realistically be Time Spiral, but then we're going down on cards that actually get us back up to 7 guaranteed for flipping Jin in the first place. Maybe it's Sad Robot. Like, unlike an Archmage Emeritus, I do not mind throwing Sad Robot in front of something and having it die because we get our card back and we get a land in the meantime. And that does ramp us in a way that gets us closer to Flow of Knowledge being a better card. We don't want to cast Flow of Knowledge if we're not drawing. Let's see, if we have to discard 2, I want to say we want to draw at least 5 cards off of it consistently. And Solemn can help with that in a way that the other artifact ramp sources can't. But at the end of the day, he's a 4-mana 2/2 that is going to get eaten by the first thing that attacks me that's on the ground. Just so I can draw the extra card from him to try and get back up to 7 so that Jin can flip over and we can start winning the game. The downside is that Augury can only look for a land in the top 3 if we need it, but it also costs half as much as Solemn Simulacrum, so... Alright. What if we cut Solemn Simulacrum then? That puts us down to 62. If we cut... We can actually cut the fetches now, which would actually help with our mana base a little bit. The only thing we have that really needs a shuffle now is Scroll Rack. So if we take out the fetches, then we actually increase... Because the problem with the fetches is that when we draw a fetch and we crack it, we now have one less land we can draw if we needed land. Like the whole idea beyond the fetches is that you crack them so that way you get land out of your deck so you don't draw more land than you need, because now every fetch takes two lands, is like drawing two lands basically until your deck is out of lands. And normally that's kind of where you want to be, because you want to have enough lands in the deck to draw into and then not draw as many later once you have enough mana. But with this deck, we're actually slightly lighter on lands, so we don't want to thin the deck early of lands. We still would be okay with doing it later, but early on, we don't want to take another land out of the deck that we could potentially draw in order to um, make sure we have our land now. Like, if we're looking at a hand where we have Scalding Tarn and two other lands, we kind of want that fourth land for a lot of things. Like, even if we have an artifact mana source, we still have a lot of 5 and 6 drops in the deck. And we want to be able to hold up counterspell mana, so we want to be able to get another land or two into our hand in the next couple draw steps at a minimum. Alright, let's say we cut Sad Robot as the last card that we absolutely need to cut, and we bring Jin down to 62. And we lean into the fact that he is capable of drawing large numbers of cards to make up for the fact that he has less land in him than normal. And he also has a fair amount of artifact based ramp as well. So it's not like he's hurting for mana sources. But if we do this, then we want to go land, find all of them. So we leave Strip Mine in. We're leaving an Ancient Tomb. We cut the fetches because we already cut Jace and Sensei's top, so we don't actually need the fetches. So we leave Reliquary Tower in, because if we overdraw before we flip Jin, we want to be able to hold every single one of those cards, so that way we get the extra card draw from having flipped Jin in the first place. We need Bastion. We cut Fabled Passage. Mystic Sanctuary counts as an island, so it's not hurting us to leave it in the deck, and we can rebuy either a powerful counterspell or card draw spell. So there's that. Like, we're not losing out by having Mystic Sanctuary in the deck. Like, it's still an island. Restoration. Hall the Storm Giants can stay. Yeah, we have room for a creature land, and I think I would rather have the very large one over, say, a oh god, the one from Urza's Legacy, the Fairy Conclave. Yeah, I think we would want Hall of Storm Giants over a Fairy Conclave or a Mutavault type card, or a Ink Moth or a Blink Moth Nexus. Like, we're not getting any extra benefit from any of those lands except for them being able to turn into creatures. And being able to turn into a large creature that can just kill, basically that can kill a planeswalker or can do a massive chunk of damage to a player post Wrath effect, is what I'm looking at Hall of the Storm Giants for. Like, the same thing it does in 60 card constructed, it can still do in Commander, if only slightly worse, because, there's more to do with your mana and other big effects. So that way it's not just like an inevitable win con when opponents are tapped out or spent from casting all their spells. But it's still a thing. Like, if somebody has to tap out to Wrath or something to protect their Planeswalker or tap low, we can just animate the Hall and kill the Planeswalker and move on. Or, to not die, then we can take that player out anyway. But, it's one of those things like, am I going to tap out or low in order to attack them for 7? Maybe I need to. Or maybe I'm in a good enough position still where I don't care about the other players. I want one of the players done. So it's a thing. It gives us an option, and the cost of putting into our deck is pretty low at this point. So yeah, that leaves us with 7 non-basic lands. So we pop back up here. So that leaves us with 31 islands in the deck. All right, I think that's good enough. Like, we desperately want to be able to draw, like I said. I feel like if we're not drawing 5 cards at least with Flow of Knowledge and getting to keep 3 of them, you know, then it's not good enough. So we currently have functionally 32 islands in the deck then, out of the 38 lands we have to work with. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Alright, I think Jin's in a good place now. So we're going to leave him at this. It was a little wonky at the end. I am not thrilled with being at 62 spells and 38 lands, but I don't think we can. If we cut anything else out of him, we are dramatically decreasing the functionality of his deck with almost every card that we cut. Like, yeah, we could cut Mindstone now, maybe, and go up to 32 land, but I actually kind of like the Mindstone a little bit more. Especially since now, if we draw a bunch of land, like, we took out the fetches because we don't want to decrease our chances of drawing land early, because that's too important, but now we do have a higher risk of flooding out, if only slightly. Cracking 1 fetch doesn't do much, but cracking 3 or 4 over the course of a game can actually give you a percentage or two better at drawing the cards that you want to draw. But yeah, I think this is it. There's probably an argument to be made for Academy Ruins with um Hedron Archive in the deck. Just being able to put that back on top and trade it in for 2 cards. If we had Alhamrat's Archive, it might be a stronger argument because then we can also draw 2 off of Mindstone being put on top. Like, putting Mindstone on top and sacking it to draw a card is neutral and spent mana, so that's not helping anything. But if we were drawing 2 from that and 4 from Hedron, then that would probably have been good enough. Since we don't have that option, though, I'm gonna stick with not running Academy Ruins. I don't think there's any other artifact in the deck that we super need to get back. That we can't just get back eventually. We don't have a way to discard the Titans, is one of the things. Like, we have a lot of things that encourage no maximum hand size. So the only way we can discard a Titan to shuffle everything back in is to not have Reliquary Tower and hit critical mass, or strip mine our own Reliquary Tower and hit critical mass on cards. So that we have to discard to hand size. So Time Spiral is the only way we're getting back anything we lose now. Eh. I mean, it's close. but we're so like condensed now on cards that I can't cut that trying to figure out how to get another card in there and replace it with a different thing feels like we've already refined the deck to this point. Maybe we don't need to keep going. Maybe it's good enough right where it is. And we'll see if there's another card or two that come out that maybe replace some of the things we're running in March of the Machines. But I think this is where Jin's going to stay. I think, yeah, Jin is good. I do like his deck. This isn't like when I had trouble cutting. I think it was Gearsenstarn. I think we had trouble with the one build of like the storm build of his deck or something, where we were done with it. I'm just like, I don't like this build at all. Jin, on the other hand, despite being a little over on the spell to land ratio, I think is in a good spot. Like, I don't think he's actually hurt that badly by being up two spells. I think he has enough mana sources in the deck that that is not going to be an issue, and enough card draw to get him around the extra lands that it, or to get him around the extra mana sources that the lands plus artifacts are giving him. Like, he has plenty of places to sink all of this extra mana if he needs to. So, yep, we're gonna call it there for Jin. So I am just getting to the point where I'm caught up on posting for Heliod from that build on YouTube. So Jin is going to start going up shortly after that. And I don't know if we're going to jump right into Omnath or not. So I'll have to see. We did finish Batman the other day, Arkham Origins. So might go back to playing Final Fantasy VII. The downside to that being I can't really post the VODs for it because of all of the copyrighted music that Square Enix, like, I didn't even hit any of the major ones, and Square Enix dinged me for two different songs in the VOD for my first playthrough. So that's a thing. Also, I want to make sure I can move the remake onto my new um oh god, what are those things called? I'm so bad with computers. Like, it's ridiculous for what I do and how much I use them. Um my extra like storage drive because I have so little memory on the computer. Um I want to move it over there first and make sure I don't corrupt like the save file data so that way I don't have to start again, because I do want to keep Final Fantasy VII on a drive in case um like part two of the remake comes out and it uses the data from part one and integrate moving forward. So I don't want to lose my save progress, and I don't want to have like everything else I'm doing on the computer have to migrate over to the other drive. I would rather just have 7 over there and have it plugged in and just load it up from there. But anyway, we'll figure out what else we're going to do. We'll eventually start in on Omnath, I'm pretty sure, unless something else catches my eye first from March of the Machines, because we are starting to get little bits and pieces. There was an article this morning, I think it's from Forbes, that has it has the mechanics that aren't like, we got battles the other day, so we got to see a battle and how it looks and how it probably works. But we also got today we got the other two mechanics, which are the transforming Phyrexian token and the keyword that gives that lets your creature put a +1/+1 counter on a creature when it comes in, and if it puts a counter on anything other than itself, the creature it targets um gains that creature's game text basically until end of turn. So there's like a first strike flying lifelink creature at rare, and it comes in, so you can put the counter on itself and it'll be a bigger first strike flying lifelink creature, or you can put the counter on another creature and that other creature will gain flying first strike and lifelink until end of turn. So It's an interesting mechanic. Like it's good to bolster your guys, and it's good to buff your other guys up and make them, as scary as the original creature for a turn. So it's interesting. And the other mechanic, the flipping token, like it's an artifact with no abilities other than to transform itself and comes with like X11 counters. And then the other side is a 0/0 Phyrexian creature. So you make the token, it gets whatever number of counters the ability that made it says it gets, and then you have to spend 2 mana to flip it into a creature. So it's kind of like how you can get a clue token that will eventually draw you a card. This is a token that eventually becomes a relevant creature token, is how it works. So yeah, those are the other two big mechanics from the set. So we'll have to see what other cards get spoiled though. But that's going to do it for me for right now. I hope you enjoyed this build for Jin-Gitaxias, and I will see you next time. Have a good rest of your day.